Good evening. Today's Friday, the 6th of February, 2026. Welcome to Chef Talks, the podcast for evolving 21st century humans who care about people, pets, and the planet and want their daily choices to reflect that care. I'm your host, Ruby Sandhu, founder of Chef, where we're reimagining nutrition for both humans and animals through a plant-powered, cruelty-free lens. Today, we're stepping into the kitchen as a site of transformation, of culture, of conscience, and our relationship with animals. My guest is Chef Rachel Adina Mullen, an award-winning plant-based chef, creator of Adina's Delicacies, and author of the acclaimed Vegan Flavors of the World, Volume 1, and I'm delighted to say now Volume 2. Through her private chef work, pilot TV series Global Vegan Kitchen, and best-selling cookbooks, Rachel shows that plant-based food can be abundant, joyful, and deeply rooted in global culinary traditions without animals on the plate. So in this conversation, we're going to explore how a self-taught baker became a global voice for compassionate cuisine, how memory and culture live in every bite, and how the recipes we choose either normalize animal suffering or help to end it. We'll also talk about aligning what we feed ourselves with what we feed our pets and how brands like Chef are helping guardians move towards plant-based, science-backed, ethical nutrition. So let's start with our wonderful Rachel. What sparked your journey into vegan cooking?
Hi, thank you for having me. I would say it all started when I started traveling a lot and learning the foods that other countries had, and I just loved being able to cook those foods and bring that curiosity rather than that formal culinary tradition into my cooking. So I thought it was like the beginning of a different kind of story and things like from each country cooking alongside home cooks and learning what people actually make for their families. And it really showed me how deeply food is tied to memory and identity, especially certain flavors instinctively transport people back to like their kitchen, their childhood, their memories, and they also like have routines. They'll go to markets, they'll go to celebrations, they'll bring this food to like their loved ones, and that that connection really fascinated me. So in my cooking, I pay really close attention to those emotional anchors and the spice blends, cooking methods, textures, and aromas that make the dish feel familiar and meaningful. So even when I interpret the recipe and make it plant-based, I want it to trigger the same sense of recognition and comfort, flavor, and become more of a storytelling experience without words. So it carries history, geography, personal experiences. I feel like in every bite, which is what I think continues to inspire how I develop recipes and why I love sharing them with others.
Amazing. What I love is the way you say, Rachel, the connection between culture, memory, and flavor. Give us your sort of lived experience of a particular, say, territory, and explain to us how you brought it to play, how that comes to life with your plant-based kitchen.
I feel like it comes with like some of my favorite recipes, which a lot of times are things that like I go back to, and it's always a hard thing for me to like figure out exactly what my favorite recipe is because I'm one of those people that always likes to make something and then like explore something new. But I think one of the things that like I find enjoyable to make, and I know a lot of people are always like, oh yes, please make that, is when I'm making like my mushroom empanadas. And then I like make them with chimichurri and just like blending all the spices together and then cooking the mushrooms with like the other ingredients and then blending them and folding the dough and then cooking it. I feel like it really brings like together technique and bold flavor and comfort in a single dish. And I really like how the filling is like deeply savory and like aromatic and the bright herbs and colors of like the chimichurri on top like really gives me a sense like how you can take just like a couple different fresh spices and it like really feels fresh and flavorful. And I think the thing I love the most is that people can experience that like you don't need to have like 50 ingredients, like sometimes two or three, just like spending time and really putting passion into it. Like there's so much flavor in that. And I feel like those things can be indulgent and familiar and also complex. So like I don't think you need to always have like that other protein based like heavy protein thing going on, and like you can have your plant-based proteins, and like different vegetables can show that they're layered and satisfying in a traditional version, and that the balance between honoring classical forms while remaining um reimagining them is very much like the heart of how I like to cook.
Amazing. So for those who don't know what chimichurri is, you're going to tell us what the
So is a
what
very popular sauce that a lot of Brazilians will add to like their food. So it's usually like red wine vinegar, oil, cilantro, or parsley, and then some people will add like garlic, salt, pepper, oregano, and then if you want it a little spicy, you can add like chili or hot sauce. And then you just blend it all up. And it's one of those things where you can eat it immediately, but it's also, it can sit for a while. And the longer it sits, like the flavors blend more. So it's a lot of fun. Like sometimes you can make it like a day or two ahead and then serve it. And then the color, the flavors really like change.
Wow. And I love food resting. I love the idea of that. Rachel, so in terms of the plant-based aspects and the meat for the chimichurri, for instance, how do you work with that? Because culture relies a lot, you're absolutely right, on spices. So with an Indian heritage, I totally get it. Spices are so key for the dishes. But what about the texture? So the texture of, say, meat in a cultural dish versus what you're creating in your wonderful two books.
I mean, texture is super important. So a lot of times when I'm making something, I try and pick a plant-based like object that the texture would be somewhat similar. So like for pork, like a pulled pork dish, I would use jackfruit, and then you just have to figure out how to marinate it so the flavors are the same. But the nice thing about something like jackfruit, it really takes on whatever you add to it. So it's a great substitute. And then also like ground beef, I'll use like crumbled TVP protein, which is textured vegetable protein. I know some people prefer less soy. So if that's the case, then maybe you would move on to something else and not use that. But it is really high in protein, and I'm of the belief that like you just kind of pick and choose like how much you eat, and a little bit of soy is fine. The quantity actually that I think most people have to eat, they never actually reach. So I I'd have to look at the statistics, but I think people are a little worried that they're getting too much soy, and that's not necessarily true. And then for other things like maybe steak or like chicken or veal or something, I'll use mushrooms. And I've noticed that when you are using mushrooms, it's all about how you're prepping it and then how you're layering your flavors. Because I've noticed a lot of times when people are cooking mushrooms, they're really like speeding through it. They're like, I just put some oil and then I grilled it and then I poured the sauce on top. And I was like, those mushrooms need to soak in the flavors. It doesn't blend well. So you have to, I think, have a little forward thinking on that. I know that I've been to some restaurants and I've personally been really disappointed when it could have been so amazing because it just felt like it was a little lazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of my terrible experiences with jackfruit out of a can, and I've tried to fry it.
And it's in
And
brine and you didn't like
it's,
rinse it or something. Yeah,
it's terrible. And again, it's because we don't know what we're doing, and we need
that's
your
fair.
expertise to say, okay, this is, this is what to do. And I think that's
Absolutely.
what I loved about your volume one, because obviously when we spoke, volume one had been published.
Yes.
And it's what you can do with tofu. And you had this lovely sweet and sour.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and there was so much ease with which these dishes could be cooked. Complexity of culture, but also simplicity in the way you could actually, put them together. So I really relish that. Um, I would love for the audience to know about how the sort of shift came from. I assume you were a meat eater at some point, and then you went into sort of veganism. What was that shift for you? Because I love these epiphanies. What was your epiphany?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I don't know if a lot of people have like the same story as me. I know a lot of people have told me they're like, I went vegan and then I didn't, and then I did, and then I didn't. So I was actually born vegan. Um, and
Right.
I was vegan until I was 6. And then for some reason my family was just like, we're just gonna start eating meat. And I was like, I don't really have a choice. Like I'm a child, so I guess I'll eat what you put in front of me. And then a couple years later, I just started having a little bit of issues, but it wasn't enough. It was more just like, oh, I don't feel so good. But my parents and doctors at that time didn't really know. They're like, just eat less, or if something bothers you, just don't eat that. But we couldn't really figure out what it was. And then I want to say when I was in like 18, 19, I started to start feeling really sick. And so I did like a lot of food diaries, went to see a lot of specialists, and I ended up finding out that I was allergic to casein and duck and chicken eggs.
Wow.
So I just took that completely off the plate. I stopped eating that and I felt a lot better. And then from there, a couple years later, I was like, I don't like what they're feeding the animals or how they're
Yeah.
ending their lives. And so I personally would prefer not to eat them. I also think that, our greenhouse gases are getting a little bit out of control. We don't have enough land. They're not, the animals aren't getting the nutrition they need, which is then not being passed on to us. And so I decided to go vegan completely again. And when I was doing that, luckily I live in California. And at this point, like the world has kind of like, there's a lot more options. I remember like I was like, oh, well, I can switch over and have vegan cheese. And for the first couple years, like the cheeses were not great. So I just made my own. But now I think there's like a ton of options. There's a ton of alternative milks. There's a ton of alternative proteins. So you don't have to spend all that extra time making those things. You can just go out and buy them. So that made it a lot easier as well. And then my next challenge was I want to be able to eat all types of foods. And I was going to all these restaurants and they're like, well, you can have a plant-based burger, or you can have pasta with just really plain sauce on it, or you can have a salad with just lettuce. Like we don't have a dressing that you can have. And I was like, well, this is unacceptable. Like I want to eat it, everything. And
Mm.
so I wasn't finding anywhere to do it. So I was like, I'll just do it myself. And that's kind of how the books started. And, because I love to travel. I love to incorporate like traditions and foods from around the world. And some of the dishes, I was like, that just looks amazing, but I can't eat it. So I'm going to make a version that respects your culture and your ingredients and hopefully tastes the same without sacrificing an animal to make it.
Amazing, because there's so many books out there, Rachel, that are vegan, but no
Mhm.
one's addressed what you've done. I haven't
Oh.
come across anyone who's really said, okay, how do we, because culture and traditions are so important and they always take a long while to sort of, forgive me for saying this, evolve or
Mhm.
transform, or and it's very hard to sort of peel away people from that because it's tribal. It's the Christmas sort of, the turkey, or
Mhm.
over different traditions, how they celebrate. So the Indians or the Chinese, so important. So what was a hard sort of transition while you were sort of doing your research and your travels? Which what was the hardest dish, and and why?
I mean, I think there are certain dishes that were more challenging to adapt into plant-based dishes. Well, okay, not so much. I felt like there were certain countries where I was like, it's going to be a little harder to find some dishes because it was, especially like maybe like South Africa, they eat so much meat and it's literally like you just give somebody a plate of sausage. And I was like, well, okay. So I'm trying to find like traditional dishes that they eat. So that was a little difficult. I mean, the desserts were not so hard because I just like basically switched like milk for vegan milk, or almond, oat, cashew, one of those. I that was some of my challenges. I think the thing that was the hardest for me was when I was visiting these countries and I went out to like eat a meal and there was like nothing I could eat, especially like in France. Like when I'm in Paris, it wasn't so bad, but like when you start to go into these smaller villages, and they kind of are like, we're stuck in our culture. We are actually offended that you're asking for us to deviate from the menu. Like when people ask me, I'm like, challenge accepted. I get excited. But some chefs don't feel that way, and that's fine. I don't personally agree with that. I feel like every day you should be slightly challenged, and accept people's, like I try and respect people's cultures and I don't go about and insult them for like their beliefs or what they want to eat. So I would hope in return that people would do the same. But I noticed that a lot. So I was eating a lot of bread. That was like my meal sometimes. I was like, oh my God, I can't eat any more bread.
Yeah, and you've said something so powerful and so important. This thing about there's also this lens, Rachel, that we have, which is, and I'm going to give you another perspective, which is you'll go in, say, to a local village. So a lot of my work was in East Africa, so Eritrea, South Sudan, and there's an assumption um, that when you go into those cultures, you must accept, be
Mm.
respectful. But I think it's disrespectful if you're not authentic to your own beliefs and you sort
Mm.
of kowtow or say, oh, we'll do that. Because to me, that's an inauthenticity. Because if you invite a guest and you truly love them and you care for them being there, it is humanity to say, oh, teach me about why you wouldn't eat that. Because then it's
Absolutely.
learning and an exchange.
Yeah, and
Um,
I've done this. I've had people from many different cultures come to my home. Had some guests come to dinner and they're Muslim and they
yeah.
don't consume any alcohol. And so, but they wanted to try a bunch of recipes from my cookbook. So I was like, oh, what country? And they were like, France. And so I was like, okay. And I have this one recipe. It's a beef Wellington. And if to make the beef, I use vegan beef with mushrooms and I add red wine. So
Yeah.
I was sitting there, I was like, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So keep the taste. I was like trying to, well, first I did a little test with like vinegar and vegetable broth, and I was like, no, that I didn't like it. I didn't feel like it tasted the same. And then I got some pomegranate juice, and I think I added a little bit of vegan butter and a little bit of vegetable broth, and I was like, okay, it kind of matches. I think I put a splash of vinegar, but I feel like if you do too much vinegar, then that like it loses that like creamy feeling or taste that when wine cooks down has. And that's kind of what I did. Oh, and then also one of the guests didn't like mushrooms, which was like a bit component. So I also had to just use onions. So that really changed the flavor. So I was like, okay, that was a challenge accepted. It was like completely different dish, but it worked out really well in the end.
I love what you say, and I love the expression that you've got to challenge yourself because we live
Yeah.
in this era of sort of it's not real political correctness. I don't like that word because we've
Yeah.
lost the ability to communicate our sort of needs, our interests, and what's important to us. And if we don't do that with authenticity and we're not learning from each other, then what are we doing? Eh? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
just, yes. So I love what you say and the fact that you've put that into practice. But there's something that's still in my mind because I remember going to South Africa exactly as you said. It was this point where there's so much meat. Well, how did you address that? You know, the barbecue, because South Africans love
Mhm.
the
They
barbecue.
loved every house has one.
How do you deal with, say you were invited? Obviously South Africa does a lot in terms of resource extraction. It's unfortunately it's something while we've got mobile phones and cars and it's inevitable, and a lot of these men work hard labor in mines or and so they're very used to that whole sort of meat diet. How did you address the South African barbecued meat on a plate with maybe one lettuce? But
Yeah.
how can you address that to give them that texture, that depth, that feeling of satiation, which meat does? How do you address that?
I mean, for that chapter, I also they like a lot of stews, so I did put some of those in there. They like to eat things out of like bread cups. One of their staple, it's like boti. So I did something like that. I have a recipe I showed how to make the bread cup, or I was like, if you don't want to make your own bread, which is time consuming, you can go buy some rolls, and then make your stew and then you put it inside. So that was super hearty that way. And then there's like different variations. You can add like vegan meat to it, or you can just have like a ton of like hearty vegetables. And then just some other things like instead of using meat, tons of different vegetables throw on the grill. Grill potatoes, grill, you know, um, other high protein items like some tofu or something and marinate it ahead of time. And then I like to, because those grills, they're like kind of like really thick. Um, so like the tofu would like just fall right through. So like I like to use silicone mats
Yeah.
and I'll put them on the grill and then that way like it doesn't fall through and it doesn't stick. Like you just add a little oil and then you're good to go.
Fantastic, absolutely. And my favorite dish, actually, that becomes harder to say as you get older because as you go through seasons and, as women, your hormones change, foods taste
Absolutely.
different.
Yeah.
But I love Thai food because of its
Oh,
delicacy
sure.
and,
Yeah.
that the aroma. There's something very fragrant and light, and also South Indian food. I love, again, I think I love coconut so much.
Me
But
too.
yeah, so what's your sort of favorite Thai and sort of South Indian dishes with coconut?
Lots of different curries. I like to mix like coconut milk with like curry powder and turmeric, especially for like the color. And then sometimes I'll add some like curry paste or like to thicken it up. Like I'll sometimes blend in like a banana. So it gets like really thick instead of like adding like more of like a cream base or like a vegan sour cream, which sometimes I'll do as well. And then I'll have like a thicker base instead of like a watery base. And then from there, like figure out like what vegetables I want. But I did make this recipe in my Indian version. It's like a chicken curry, but you can use pomfu or tofu
Mhm.
because I like the consistency of both. And then I bake it in my oven. But if you had like air fryer, you could also do it. You could do it on your stove too, but like the reason I like the oven is because you just put it on your baking sheet with like parchment paper or a silicone mat. You don't have to put any oil or anything on it. You just pop it in the oven, cook it for 15 minutes, flip it, put it back in for 15 minutes, and it gets like crispy. But when you do it on the stove, you have to add a bunch of oil, and which is fine too. But then, like, you don't have to think about it. Just an oven, and a lot of times I'll throw something else in there too. And I'm like, okay, while I'm doing that, I can make my curry sauce. So that's kind of like the way I like to crisp up my tofu.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you've actually reminded me with the lasagna, the vegan lasagna I make. So
Oh, amazing.
yeah, I literally do it by putting the roasting the vegetables because the texture and the taste
I
is so much
love
different when it's
roasting.
been cooked. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can put it into the whole sort of lasagna
Mhm.
mix
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
choose sauce, the
Yes.
cream. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So I have to stop myself from eating as I go along. But but I love that. So Rachel, for the audience, I'd love to hear so if you think back from the beginning of when you started this journey to now, what have you learned about yourself, the foods, and how has that sort of changed life around you with with your husband, your family, your friends? Lovely to hear that journey.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like they've been really encouraging and respectful because I'm respectful of their choices. Like, I've never, like, I mean, honestly, if somebody came up to me and they're like, truthfully, why don't you eat meat? And then I have my, you know, response, oh, well, I have an ethical issue with it and I'm doing it for my own personal health reasons. And they're like, no, no, really. And then I'd be like, oh, you want the nitty gritty? Okay, we can go into it. But usually I try and be respectful about it because I don't know if it's like an inner thing for them. Like if you're pointing at somebody, even if you're saying, I don't do it for these reasons, a lot of times people are like, oh, great. Now I feel like I'm murdering a bunch of animals. And a lot of people are like, I love animals. I have 5 dogs. And I'm like, that's great. Um, but it's definitely a handful of things like my general health, how like industries are taking resources from the earth. Our soil is terrible. I don't know how it is like everywhere else, but we're like sucking all the nutrients out of the soil. The animals aren't getting the nutrition they need, therefore, they're getting supplements that they're not meant to have. They're not digesting it properly. We're also rushing to get these animals like to get super bulky so we can eat them. And then just get them out there and also like how they're being raised, how their lives are being ended. Uh, and also just like the toll it's having on like our water, our air, transportation, all that stuff. I mean, I know that people will say, well, the same is true for like almonds. It takes so much water. And I'm like, okay, I'm not saying that it's perfect, but maybe if we didn't have to feed and I don't know how much one cow drinks in a day, but it probably is somewhat equivalent. So, I mean, if we can cut that back even by 10%, I think that maybe the almond water consumption might not be as big of an issue. Uh, so, I mean, those are just some things that like I think about when I'm trying to choose the food that I'm eating.
It's a beautiful way of a platform for activism because you have something to show and people experience the taste. And there's something very communal about sitting together and eating as friends, family. I think it's a very powerful platform because food is so core, to who we are and how we relate. So what you've done is so powerful. Bless the activists who are out on the streets but there is a thing that when you activate something that is very near and dear to yourself, the fear is that it doesn't activate in the other exactly as you say, that sort of judgment, and not feeling good about themselves because we don't want to add more of that into the world. So I think the magic of what you do is so, so important because how beautiful to say, yes, I'm a vegan. Would you like to, try this
Yeah,
food?
a lot of
And
people that will come up to me and they're like, I'm not vegan. And I'm like, that's okay. You can still eat it. Like, and I know a lot of people also that are like, I don't necessarily want to stop eating meat, but I want to cut down how much
yeah,
meat I have, but I don't know what to eat in substitution. And I'm like, I got over 400 recipes in these 2 books. Like, you got plenty of options.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a wonderful way. And again, Rachel, it's the fact that you've made it so simple. That's what's so magical because you get very concerned when you've got to go out and get these very difficult ingredients, and
Ingredient.
does your local supermarket sort of hold it, or if you're living in a little village, and
Right.
so it's the ease with which you've done that, which is amazing, and also technique. So my tofu and my jackfruit days, literally, if you fry tofu, you've sealed it in, and
Right.
you've neither cooked it so it's
Right.
crunchy,
Exactly.
and you get a
Exactly.
terribly tire, like this rubbery, and you put it in the salad and you go, gosh, how can I ever, eat this? Just,
Yes.
it's not satiating. So that is so, so key. Um, I'd love to hear, Rachel, when you did the pilot global vegan kitchen, how did you find that sort of approach to taking veganism mainstream? What was your experience of that?
I mean, I felt like the filming was like really educational. I like flew to New York. They had the whole kitchen. I had people that went shopping. So like when I got there, all I had to do was like measure everything out, and it was great. The crew, like ever in between each take, there was just like a woman that came over and like cleaned everything up, and I was like, if only you could come home with me. But I think the feedback that I got mostly was that it was really encouraging, and I felt like the viewers and the industry professionals have responded positively to the content. Like we had over 13,000 views within a couple days.
Wow.
Um, and that they like even the crew was like, we don't eat vegan food. And I was like, all right, well then I'll just take it home with me. And they're like, wait, no, 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 let us try it. And then I had to actually hoard some aside because I was like, I was actually planning on eating some of this for lunch. So I had to like beg them for some of the food. But they were like, oh, this is actually really good. So it was nice to hear all the carnivores that were filming were like, oh, this is fun. But I felt like this show really like did something because a lot of the chefs that are on the network like specialize in like hibachi or like all about like one like Asian cooking or like American barbecue. And so like I was their first vegan chef that did global cuisine, and so they really were like, if it gets picked up, we really would like to take one episode for each country in the book. And I was like, well, that's great because there's 12 countries, 12 episodes. And so for the pilot, we ended up doing Brazil, which was just a lot of fun. And it was really just great to like meet them. And I mean, hopefully it will get picked up at some point. We almost got enough money through sponsorship, but not enough to like get it kicked off.
Oh, goodness. Wow. So that really needs support. And I think it's so important. It
Yeah.
needs to be sort of mainstream. But I haven't come across anyone who's done this sort of global kitchen. And I think that's so, so important because we travel a lot now.
I
And
do.
so, yeah, so when you come back home, you're thinking, oh, how do I re-experience that dish? And usually what we do is we'll go out to a restaurant and say for sort of Eritrean or Ethiopian food. But
Yeah.
how do you experience that, at home, and how easy is it to do that? How can we support you on that pilot? What can we do?
I mean, if you just want to email me, and like if you know somebody that can sponsor it, also like there's some other TV things that I really would love to do. Like I would like to pitch like my dream TV show that I would just like this is one of the things that like is on the horizon that I would love to like have take off is that I get to travel the world, meeting with other chefs, go behind the scenes, talk to them about like their cultural meals, things they love, the things they have on their menu, and then some episodes we'll cook together, some episodes maybe I'm in a field with like a lavender farmer or something. We're talking about like why it's so important that this farm is here, how it helps, the economy, things like that. Learning about different cultures, and then other times maybe I'll be in the kitchen alone, other times cooking with other people, but taking their dishes and making them all plant-based while keeping the culture and then having people like eat it. And then sometimes I'll bring in like friends and family and we'll travel together, but really like getting to know people, seeing like, and maybe sometimes we're not at a restaurant, we're in somebody's kitchen, but that's something I would love to do.
Rachel, it's such a fantastic concept and so needed. And also extraordinarily because of, say, religious
Hmm.
traditions. So the example I give is, for instance, of Eritrea or even South Sudan. I had no problem going vegan because they would give me food that they had when they were doing their sort of Christian Orthodox or Muslim Orthodox fasting month.
Oh,
So they would say, "Oh, I see. So during fasting, we don't eat meat or dairy. Oh, okay, we can cook you that because that's what we have then." And I went, "This is fantastic." And the food was, because it's natural, it's nothing off a supermarket shelf. And
hmm.
the soil has a different sort of quality. It hasn't been, the large corporations haven't gone in with sort of genetically modified
Yeah.
things. It's still the taste, which is really, powerful. And I think that really needs to be brought home, to the audience here, for them to experience. But also, Rachel, just to understand how small the world is and how similar we all
Mhm.
are. I
Yeah.
mean, the tastes and the spices are all, context specific. South Indians, the food could be hotter than it is in North India, and that's because there was no refrigeration. So
Mhm.
all of that sort of, fascinating. So actually, Rachel, you're doing more than just bringing um, an awareness of plant-based cooking. You're actually introducing much more. So I think there's a lot of work that you're doing, which is like Trojan horse.
Yeah.
So it's really wonderful and really beautifully executed in the sense that it's just such a powerful way as a woman to bring the messaging in such an aligned, positive, constructive way. I absolutely love it. So I suppose when I say what's next for you, um, I'm going to put your details for those who've got sort of funding to really support your mission and vision to in order that you can really execute that vision that you have, which is so, so important. It's really needed, and I haven't seen it anywhere else. So I will be putting those details there. And what other than that, what else in terms of you've done volume one, you've done now covered the globe.
Yeah.
So what's coming
I've
out?
done volume one.
Yeah,
I just published volume two. It's it's funny. So here's volume one.
beautiful.
And I'm gonna boast for just a second because this
Yeah,
book won a Zibby Award, but just 4 days ago, it won an international award as well. And
fantastic.
this book was already printed, so I haven't added it to it,
Yeah,
but now it has won two awards. And my second book, this is my mock-up, so it says not for sale on it. But this is what it looks like. You can get it on Amazon,
yeah,
and it has 12 other countries, including India. I know
yes,
that you like that. Um,
absolutely. The gulab jamun. Remember we,
it has
yes,
the, yes, it does. It does have
yeah.
that in there.
We
Yeah.
I'm definitely so I have your first book and I've also gifted it and they
Oh,
love it. So it's just fantastic. So I've gifted it to vegetarians, to vegans, and so I'm really excited about the second book. So that's the next lot.
yes,
Absolutely amazing. But you need both of those to give you a global view, and how powerful as well, because it just means that if you've got friends coming over from anywhere in the world, to give them that
absolutely.
sort of
That country
exposure.
might be in there. And if not, don't worry, I'm working. Well, when I say I'm working, I mean, I actually probably this week or next, I'm going to start working on my syllabus for volume three. So
Fabulous.
still deciding on countries, but I plan to go to Bhutan and Riyadh later this year, as well as Iceland. So you might find those countries in there.
I am so excited because I came back from Bhutan a year ago, and they don't have slaughterhouses,
I love that.
but sadly they get their meat imported. So
Yeah.
that's something that needs to be worked on. But the way the animals are, they have a very different you have a very different experience when you meet them to how animals are here. An
Yeah.
animal it sort of runs as it sees you. But Bhutan is very, very it's great work that you're going to be doing there. Very, very powerful. So very excited about that. And Riyadh, wow, I've noticed a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, they're picking up on this.
Hmm.
They're becoming aware, for health and certainly for water and environment and climate. So
Yes.
you're absolutely on point. Um, wow, Rachel, such a pleasure. And going to purchase your books and give them to my friends. So
Oh,
that's a definite. And I've started practicing the recipes. I made my sweet and
oh,
sour tofu properly this time, and lots of amazing other recipes. So we've been plowing through it. We've been sharing it with friends. Really is a must. So if the audience is listening, you have to have purchased these two wonderful books and really experience it for yourself to really cook properly in terms of texture and experience those cultures with the spices as well. So Rachel, what a pleasure. And
thank
yes, I'm going to put all your details and the bio in the podcast, and I'll be posting this video as well. But an absolute delight to have you, my friend. And I'll be watching closely how you do. And yeah, just wishing you all success.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.